Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. As you can see here on the screen, I'm a very big fan of the Lexus GX 470. Here I've got all four of my vehicles. I do own more of them, but they're not parked here with me today. So what we're going to do is we're going to work on a front CV axle. I've got a clunk that's happening. We're going to do it on the red car here. It's this car here. It's going to be the passenger front. And yeah, I like this car. It's definitely a good looking car, but there's been a clunk in the front end when you put it into drive from park. So let's get right into it. Here we can see that tire has quite a bit of play in it. It's got nearly a quarter turn of play. As we zoom in here, you can see that the axle is able to turn inside that inner joint. And that's where the clunk is coming from. So we'll get in there and I'll show you exactly how to replace it.
So I've got the vehicle lifted off the ground. This tire is not on the ground, and we can see how much play is in that CV axle. So step one is to remove the wheel.
A 21mm socket will remove the lug nuts. If you don't have an impact wrench, then breaking them loose before you're lifting the vehicle makes it a heck of a lot easier. This vehicle is equipped with an aftermarket lift kit done by Icon. There will be a few discrepancies, mostly dealing with the upper control arm. But what we're going to end up doing is we're going to be trying to get that axle out of here. And the pieces that we're going to be working with is this here clip from the ABS. I'll show you how to remove that in time. On the other side here, we have the brake caliper. That's going to be removed as well. And the two bolts can be found here on the back side. They are both 17mm. But I'll show you how to do that here shortly, so follow along.
So the technique that I use to get behind this little plate is I start with a small screwdriver and I put it in here like so, and then I tap it with a hammer. Do want to be careful. If it's your favorite screwdriver, you can break the tip off of, so an old one with rounded edges are usually a little better. Once it starts to pull apart, something a little fatter, I happen to have this chisel here. It starts to get behind there a little easier once a screwdriver gets it started.
Removal of this dust cover can be a little bit of a bear. There's not much of a good strategy that I've ever found. Persistence and creative angles with a screwdriver tends to work. So I'll fast forward the clip here. As you can see, I fiddle with it for a minute or two. And eventually I get it. So keep at it, you'll get there. Once we get that dust cover off, the next step is to pull out the cotter pin. Simple pair of pliers. Here I'm using a pair of needle nose. And you just bend it as straight as you can and pull it out from the back side. Here I'm using a 35mm socket accompanied with my impact wrench. If you don't have an impact wrench, breaker bar and engaging the brakes makes pretty easy work of that.
The next step we do is remove the brake caliper. There are 2 bolts on the back side, and I also like to remove this little bracket here to allow for the hose to be more flexible, so I can set it out of the way a little better. There's a couple strategies to hanging the caliper. We want to be very careful with our brake lines. We do not want to do any damage to those, so we want to make sure they're not hanging. The caliper's not hanging from our brake lines. That can cause damage. So some people like to hang it with a wire or a bungee cord or something. I like to use a bucket. I find it to be really much more simple. Sort of set it here gently, and it sort of hangs out the rest of the time.
A 12mm socket fits the bolt here that holds the brake line bracket, and a 17mm socket fits the 2 bolts on the back side of the caliper.
One other thing we want to do before we remove the caliper altogether is we want to disconnect the ABS